Before being nominated, all viable presidential candidates are thoroughly investigated by their own party, and Donald Trump is no exception. Regarding this dossier, initially funded by Republicans and later by Democrats, the Trump Dossier and the investigations preceding it were part of political opposition research done on then-candidate Donald Trump. Some of the details contained herein have been independently verified, while others have yet to be proved or disproved. The 17 memos that make up the dossier were compiled from June 2016 through December 2016 and written by veteran intelligence officer Christopher Steele, formerly with United Kingdom's MI6. Without further comment, here now is the Trump Dossier. Confidential, sensitive source. Company Intelligence Report, 2016/080. U.S. presidential election. Republican candidate Donald Trump's activities in Kremlin and compromising relationship with the Kremlin. Detail. 1. Speaking to a trusted compatriot in June 2016, sources A and B, a senior Russian foreign ministry figure and a former top-level Russian intelligence officer, still active inside the Kremlin respectively. The Russian authorities had been cultivating and supporting U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump for at least 5 years. Source B asserted that the Trump operation was both supported and directed by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Its aim was to sow discord and disunity, both within the U.S. itself, but more especially within the transatlantic alliance, which was viewed as inimical to Russian interests. Source C, a senior Russian financial official, said the Trump operation should be seen in terms of Putin's desire to return to 19th century great power politics, anchored upon countries' interests, rather than the ideals-based international order established after World War II. This person had overheard Putin talking in this way to close associates on several occasions. 2. In terms of specifics, Source A confided that the Kremlin had been feeding Trump and his team valuable intelligence on his opponents, including Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, for several years. See more below. This was confirmed by Source D, a close associate of Trump who had organized and managed his recent trips to Moscow, and who reported also in June 2016 that this Russian intelligence had been, quote, very helpful, unquote. The Kremlin's cultivation operation on Trump also had comprised offering him various lucrative real estate development business deals in Russia, especially in relation to the ongoing 2018 World Cup soccer tournament. However, so far, for reasons unknown, Trump had not taken up any of these. 3. However, there were other aspects to Trump's engagement with the Russian authorities. One which had borne fruit for them was to exploit Trump's personal obsessions and sexual perversion in order to obtain suitable compromising material on him. According to Source D, where she had been present, Trump's perverted conduct in Moscow included hiring the presidential suite of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where he knew President and Mrs. Obama, whom he hated, had stayed on one of their official trips to Russia, and defiling the bed where they had slept by employing a number of prostitutes to perform a golden showers urination show in front of Trump. The hotel was known to be under FSB control, with microphones and concealed cameras in all the main rooms to record anything they wanted to. 4. The Moscow Ritz-Carlton episode involving Trump reported above was confirmed by Source E, name redacted, who said that he, she, and several of the staff were aware of it at the time and subsequently. This person believed it had happened in 2013. Source E provided an introduction for a company ethnic Russian operative to Source F, a female staffer at the hotel when Trump had stayed there, who also confirmed the story. Speaking separately in June 2016, Source B, the former top-level Russian intelligence officer, asserted that Trump's unorthodox behavior in Russia over the years had provided authorities there with enough embarrassing material on the now Republican presidential candidate to be able to blackmail him if they so wished. 5. Asked about the Kremlin's reported intelligence feed to Trump over recent years and rumors about the Russian dossier of compromise on Hillary Clinton being circulated, Source B confirmed the file's existence. This person confided in a trusted compatriot that it had been collated by Department K of the FSB for many years, dating back to her husband Bill's presidency, and comprised mainly eavesdropped conversations of various sorts, rather than details or evidence of unorthodox or embarrassing behavior. Some of the conversations were from bugged comments Clinton had made on her various trips to Russia, and focused on things she had said which contradicted her current position on various issues. Others were most probably from phone intercepts. 6. Continuing on this theme, Source G, a senior Kremlin official, confided that the Clinton dossier was controlled exclusively by Chief Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, who was responsible for compiling and handling it on the explicit instructions of Putin himself. The dossier, however, had not as yet been made available abroad, including to Trump or his campaign team. At present, it was unclear what Putin's intentions were in this regard. 20 June 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016/086. Russia Cybercrime. A synopsis of Russian state-sponsored and other cyber-offensive criminal operations. Details. 1. Speaking in June 2016, a number of Russian figures with a detailed knowledge of national cybercrime, both state-sponsored and otherwise, outlined the current situation in this area. A former senior intelligence officer divided Russian state-sponsored offensive cyber operations into 4 categories in order of priority: targeting foreign, especially Western governments, penetrating leading foreign business corporations, especially banks, domestic monitoring of the elite, and attacking political opponents both at home and abroad. The former intelligence officer reported that the Federal Security Service, FSB, was the lead organization within the Russian state apparatus for cyber operations. 2. In terms of the success of Russian offensive cyber operations to date, a senior government figure reported that there had been only limited success in penetrating the first-tier foreign targets. These comprise Western, especially G7 and NATO governments, security and intelligence services and central banks, and the IFIs. To compensate for this shortfall, massive effort had been invested with much greater success in attacking the quote-unquote secondary targets, particularly Western private banks and the governments of smaller states allied to the West. She mentioned Latvia in this regard. Hundreds of agents, either consciously cooperating with the FSB or whose personal and professional IT systems had been unwittingly compromised, were recruited. Many were people who had ethnic or family ties to Russia and or had been incentivized financially to cooperate. Such people would often receive monetary inducements or contractual favors from the Russian state or its agents in return. This had created difficulties for parts of the Russian state apparatus in obliging and indulging them, e.g. the Central Bank of Russia, knowingly having to cover up for such agents' money laundering operations through the Russian financial system. 3. In terms of the FSB's recruitment of capable cyber operatives to carry out its, ideally deniable, offensive cyber operations, a Russian IT specialist with direct knowledge reported in June 2016 that this was often done using coercion or blackmail. In terms of foreign agents, the FSB was approaching U.S. citizens of Russian Jewish origin on business trips to Russia. In one case, a U.S. citizen of Russian ethnicity had been visiting Moscow to attract investors for his new information technology program. The FSB clearly knew this and had offered to provide seed capital to this person in return for them being able to access and modify his IP with a view to targeting priority foreign targets by planting a Trojan virus in the software. The U.S. visitor was told this was common practice. The FSB also had implied significant operational success as a result of installing cheap Russian IT games containing their own malware, unwittingly by targets on their PCs and other platforms. 4. In a more advanced and successful FSB operation, an IT operator inside a leading Russian SOE, who previously had been employed on conventional, defensive IT work there, had been under instruction for the last year to conduct an offensive cyber operation against a foreign director of the company. Although the latter was apparently an infrequent visitor to Russia, the FSB now successfully had penetrated his personal IT, and through this had managed to access various important institutions in the West through the back door. 5. In terms of other technical IT platforms, an FSB cyber operative flagged up the Telegram enciphered commercial system as having been of especial concern and therefore heavily targeted by the FSB, not least because it was used frequently by Russian internal political activists and oppositionists. Her understanding was that the FSB now successfully had cracked this communication software, and therefore it was no longer secure to use. 6. The senior Russian government figure cited above also reported that non-state-sponsored cybercrime was becoming an increasing problem inside Russia for the government and the authorities there. The Central Bank of Russia claimed that in 2015 alone, there had been more than 20 attempts at serious cyber embezzlement of money from corresponding accounts held there, compromising several billions rubles. More generally, this person understood there were circa 15 major organized crime groups in the country involved in cybercrime, all of which continued to operate largely outside state and FSB control. These included the so-called Anunak, Bootstrap, and Metal organizations. 26 July 2015. Company Intelligence Report 2016/095. Russia-US presidential election. Further indications of extensive conspiracy between Trump's campaign team and the Kremlin. Detail. 1. Speaking in confidence to a compatriot in late July 2016, Source E, an ethnic Russian close associate of Republican U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump, admitted there was a well-developed conspiracy of cooperation between them and the Russian leadership. This was managed on the Trump side by the Republican candidate's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who was using foreign policy advisor Carter Page and others as intermediaries. The two sides had a mutual interest in defeating Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, whom President Putin apparently both hated and feared. 2. Inter alia, Source E acknowledged that the Russian regime had been behind the recent leak of embarrassing email messages emanating from the Democratic National Committee, DNC, to the WikiLeaks platform. The reason for using WikiLeaks was quote-unquote plausible deniability, and the operation had been conducted with the full knowledge of Trump and senior members of his campaign team. In return, the Trump team had agreed to sideline Russian intervention in Ukraine as a campaign issue and to raise U.S. NATO defense commitments in the Baltics and Eastern Europe to deflect attention away from Ukraine, a priority for Putin, who needed to cauterize the subject. 3. In the wider context of Trump campaign Kremlin cooperation, Source E claimed the intelligence network being used against Clinton comprised 3 elements. Firstly, there were agents and facilitators within the Democratic Party structure itself. Secondly, Russian émigrés and associated offensive cyber operators based in the U.S. And thirdly, state-sponsored cyber operatives working in Russia. All 3 elements had played an important role to date. On the mechanism of rewarding relevant assets based in the U.S. and effecting a two-way flow of intelligence and other useful information, Source E claimed that Russian diplomatic staff in key cities such as New York, Washington, D.C., and Miami were using the émigré pension distribution system as cover. The operation, therefore, depended on key people in the U.S.-Russian émigré community for its success. Tens of thousands of dollars were involved. 4. In terms of the intelligence flow from the Trump team to Russia, Source E reported that much of this concerned the activities of business oligarchs and their families' activities and assets in the U.S., with which Putin and the Kremlin seemed preoccupied. 5. Commenting on the negative media publicity surrounding alleged Russian interference in the U.S. election campaign in support of Trump, Source E said he understood that the Republican candidate and his team were relatively relaxed about this because it deflected media and Democrats' attention away from Trump's business dealings in China and other emerging markets. Unlike Russia, these were substantial and involved the payment of large bribes and kickbacks which, were they to become public, would be potentially very damaging to their campaign. 6. Finally, regarding Trump's claimed minimal investment profile in Russia, a separate source with direct knowledge said this had not been for want of trying. Trump's previous efforts had included exploring the real estate sector in St. Petersburg as well as Moscow. But in the end, Trump had to settle for the use of extensive sexual services there from local prostitutes, rather than business success. Although most commentators believed that the Kremlin was behind the leaked DNC Clinton emails, this remained technically deniable. Therefore, the Russians would not risk their position for the time being with new leaked material, even to a third party like WikiLeaks. Rather, the tactics would be to spread rumors and misinformation about the content of what already had been leaked, and make up new content. 2. Continuing on this theme, Sergei Ivanov said that the audience to be targeted by such operations was the educated youth in America, as the presidential administration, PA, assessed that there was still a chance they could be persuaded to vote for the Republican candidate Donald Trump as a protest against the Washington establishment in the form of Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton. The hope was that even if she won, as a result of this, Clinton in power would be bogged down in working for internal reconciliation in the U.S., rather than being able to focus on foreign policy, which would damage Russia's interests. This also should give President Putin more room to maneuver in the run-up to Russia's own presidential election in 2018. 3. Ivanov reported that, although the Kremlin had underestimated the strength of U.S. media and liberal reaction to the DNC hack and Trump's links to Russia, Putin was generally satisfied with the progress of the anti-Clinton operation to date. Ivanov recently had had a drink with Putin to mark this. In Ivanov's view, the U.S. had tried to divide the Russian elite with sanctions, but failed, whilst they, by contrast, had succeeded in splitting the U.S. hawks, inimical to Russia and the Washington elite more generally, half of whom refused to endorse any presidential candidates as a result of Russian intervention. 4. Speaking separately, also in early August 2016, a Kremlin official involved in U.S. relations commented on aspects of the Russian operation to date. Its goals had been threefold: asking sympathetic U.S. actors how Moscow could help them, gathering relevant intelligence, and creating and disseminating compromising information, compromat. This had involved the Kremlin supporting various U.S. political figures, including funding indirectly their recent visits to Moscow. She named a delegation from Lyndon LaRoche, presidential candidate Jill Stein of the Green Party, Trump foreign policy advisor Carter Page, and former DIA director Michael Flynn, in this regard as successful in terms of perceived outcomes. 10 August 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016/102. Russia-U.S. presidential election. Reaction in Trump camp to recent negative publicity about Russian interference and likely resulting tactics going forward. Detail. 1. Speaking in confidence on 9 August 2016, an ethnic Russian associate of Republican U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump discussed the reaction inside his camp and revised tactics therein resulting from the recent negative publicity concerning Moscow's clandestine involvement in the campaign. Trump's associate reported that the aim of leaking the DNC emails to WikiLeaks during the Democratic convention had been to swing supporters of Bernie Sanders away from Hillary Clinton and across to Trump. These voters were perceived as activist and anti-status quo and anti-establishment, in that regard sharing many features with the Trump campaign, including a visceral dislike of Hillary Clinton. This objective had been conceived and promoted inter alia by Trump's foreign policy advisor Carter Page, who had discussed it directly with the ethnic Russian associate. 2. Continuing on this theme, the ethnic Russian associate of Trump assessed that the problem was that the Trump campaign had underestimated the strength of the negative reaction from liberals and especially the conservative elite to Russia interference. This was forcing a rethink and a likely change of tactics. The main objective in the short term was to check Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton's successful exploitation of Putin as boogeyman and the Russian interference story to tarnish Trump and bolster her own patriotic credentials. The Trump campaign was focusing on tapping into support in the American television media to achieve this, as they reckoned this resource had been underused by them to date. 3. However, Trump's associate also admitted there had been a fair amount of anger and resentment within the Republican campaign team at what was perceived by Putin as going beyond the objective of weakening Clinton and bolstering Trump by attempting to exploit the situation to undermine the U.S. government and democratic system more generally. It was unclear at present how this aspect of the situation would play out in the weeks to come. 10 August 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016/136. Russia-U.S. presidential election. Further details of Trump lawyer Michael Cohen's secret liaison with the Kremlin. Detail. 1. Speaking to a compatriot and friend on 19 October 2016, a Kremlin insider provided further details of reported clandestine meeting or meetings between Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's lawyer Michael Cohen and Kremlin representatives in August of 2016. Although the communication between them had to be cryptic for security reasons, the Kremlin insider clearly indicated to his or her friend that the reported contact or contacts took place in Prague, Czech Republic. 2. Continuing on this theme, the Kremlin insider highlighted the importance of the Russian parastatal organization Rosotrudnichvesto. In this contact between Trump campaign representatives and Kremlin officials, Rosotrudnichvesto was being used as cover for this relationship, and its office in Prague may well have been used to host the Cohen Russian Presidential Administration PA meeting or meetings. It was considered a plausibly deniable vehicle for this, whilst remaining entirely under Kremlin control. 3. The Kremlin insider went on to identify leading pro-Putin Duma figure Konstantin Kosachev, head of the Foreign Relations Committee, as an important figure in the Trump campaign Kremlin liaison operation. Kosachev, also plausibly deniable, being part of the Russian legislature rather than executive, had facilitated the contact in Prague and, by implication, may have attended the meetings with Michael Cohen there in August. Company comment. We reported previously in our Company Intelligence Report 2016/135 of 19 October 2016 from the same source that Michael Cohen met with officials from Russia's Presidential Administration Legal Department clandestinely in an EU country in August of 2016. This was in order to clean up the mess left behind by Western media revelations of Trump ex-campaign manager Paul Manafort's corrupt relationship with the former pro-Russian Yanukovych regime in Ukraine, and Trump foreign policy advisor Carter Page's secret meetings in Moscow with senior regime figures in July 2016. According to the Kremlin advisor, these meetings were originally scheduled for Michael Cohen in Moscow, but shifted to what was considered an operationally soft EU country when it was judged too compromising for him to travel to the Russian capital. 20 October 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016/105. Russia-Ukraine. The demise of Trump's campaign manager Paul Manafort. Detail. 1. Speaking in late August 2016, in the immediate aftermath of Paul Manafort's resignation as campaign manager for the U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, a well-placed Russian figure reported on a recent meeting between President Putin and ex-President Yanukovych of Ukraine. This had been held in secret on 15 August near Volgograd, Russia, and the Western media revelations about Manafort and Ukraine had featured prominently on the agenda. Yanukovych had confided in Putin that he did authorize and order substantial kickback payments to Manafort as alleged, but sought to reassure Putin that there was no documentary trail left behind which could provide clear evidence of this. 2. Given Yanukovych's unimpressive record in covering up his own corrupt tracks in the past, Vladimir Putin and others in the Russian leadership were skeptical about the ex-Ukrainian president's reassurances on this as relating to Paul Manafort. They therefore still feared the scandal had legs, especially as Manafort had been commercially active in Ukraine right up to the time, in March 2016, when he joined Trump's campaign team. For them, therefore remained a point of potential political vulnerability and embarrassment. 3. Speaking separately, also in late August 2016, an American political figure associated with Donald Trump and his campaign outlined the reason behind Paul Manafort's recent demise. This person said it was true that the Ukraine corruption revelations had played a part in this, but also several senior players close to Trump had wanted Paul Manafort out, primarily to loosen his control on strategy and policy formulation. Of particular importance in this regard was Manafort's predecessor as campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, who hated Manafort personally and remained close to Trump, with whom he discussed the presidential campaign on a regular basis. 22 August 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016/111. Russia-US. Kremlin fallout from media exposure of Moscow's interference in the U.S. presidential campaign. Detail. 1. Speaking in confidence to a trusted compatriot in mid-September 2016, a senior member of the Russian Presidential Administration, PA, commented on the political fallout from recent Western media revelations about Moscow's intervention in favor of Donald Trump and against Hillary Clinton in the U.S. presidential election. The PA official reported that the issue had become incredibly sensitive, and that President Putin had issued direct orders that Kremlin and government insiders should not discuss it in public or even in private. 2. Despite this, the PA official confirmed from direct knowledge that the gist of the allegations was true. Putin had been receiving conflicting advice on interfering from 3 separate and expert groups. On one side had been the Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, together with an independent and informal network run by foreign policy advisor Yuri Yushakov, Kislyak's predecessor in Washington, who had urged caution and the potential negative impact on Russia from the operations. On the other side was former PA head Sergei Ivanov, backed by Russian Foreign Intelligence, SVR, who had advised Putin that the pro-Trump anti-Clinton operations would be both effective and plausibly deniable with little blowback. The first groups had been proven right, and this had been the catalyst in Putin's decision to sack Ivanov unexpectedly as PA head in August. His successor, Anton Vaino, had been selected for the job partly because he had not been involved in the U.S. presidential election operations. 3. Continuing on this theme, the senior PA official said the situation now was that the Kremlin had further compromised on candidate Clinton and had been considering releasing this via plausibly deniable channels after the Duma legislative elections were out of the way in mid-September. There was, however, a growing train of thought and associated lobby arguing that the Russians could still make candidate Clinton look, quote, weak and stupid, unquote, by provoking her into railing against Putin and Russia without the need to release more of her emails. Presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov remained a key figure in the operation, although any final decision on dissemination of further material would be taken by Vladimir Putin himself. 4. The senior PA official also reported that a growing element in Moscow's intervention in the U.S. presidential election campaign was the objective of shifting the U.S. political consensus in Russia's perceived interests, regardless of who won. It basically comprised of pushing candidate Clinton away from President Obama's policies. The best example of this was that both candidates now openly opposed the draft trade agreements, Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, which were assessed by Moscow as detrimental to Russian interests. Other issues where the Kremlin was looking to shift U.S. policy consensus were Ukraine and Syria. Overall, however, the presidential election was considered still to be too close to call. 5. Finally, speaking separately to the same compatriot, a senior Russian MFA official reported that, as a prophylactic measure, A leading Russian diplomat, Mikhail Kulugin, had been withdrawn from Washington at short notice because Moscow feared his heavy involvement in the U.S. presidential election operation, including the so-called veterans' pensions ruse, reported previously, would be exposed in the media there. His replacement, Andrei Bondarev, however, was clean in this regard. Company comment. The substance of what was reported by the senior Russian PA official in paragraphs 1 and 2 above, including the reasons for Sergei Ivanov's dismissal, was corroborated independently by a former top-level Russian intelligence officer and Kremlin insider also in mid-September. 14 September 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016/112. Russia-U.S. Presidential Election. Kremlin Alpha Group Cooperation. Detail. 1. Speaking to a trusted compatriot in mid-September 2016, a top-level Russian government official commented on the history and current state of relations between President Putin and the Alpha Group of businesses led by oligarchs Mikhail Friedman, Peter Avin, and Herman Khan. The Russian government figure reported that although they had had their ups and downs, the leading figures in Alpha currently were on very good terms with Putin. Significant favors continued to be done in both directions, primarily political ones for Putin and business legal ones for Alpha. Also, Friedman and Avin continued to give informal advice to Putin on foreign policy, and especially about the U.S., where he distrusted advice being given to him by officials. 2. Although Friedman recently had met directly with Putin in Russia, much of the dialogue and business between them was mediated through a senior presidential administration official, Oleg Govorin, who currently headed the department therein, responsible for social cooperation with the CIS. Govorin was trusted by Putin and recently had accompanied him to Uzbekistan to pay their respects at the tomb of former President Karimov. However, according to the top-level Russian government official, during the 1990s, Govorin had been head of government relations at Alpha Group, and in reality the driver and bag carrier used by Friedman and Avin to deliver large amounts of illicit cash to the Russian president, at that time deputy mayor of St. Petersburg. Given that, and the continuing sensitivity of the Putin-Alpha relationship and need for plausible deniability, much of the contact between them was now indirect and entrusted to the relatively low-profile Govorin. 3. The top-level Russian government official described the Putin-Alpha relationship as both carrot and stick. Alpha held compromise on Putin and his corrupt business activities from the 1990s, whilst, although not personally overly bothered by Alpha's failure to reinvest the proceeds of its TNK oil company sale into the Russian economy since, the Russian president was able to use pressure on this count from senior Kremlin colleagues as a lever on Friedman and Avin to make them do Putin's political bidding. 14 September 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016/113. Russia-U.S. presidential election. Republican candidate Trump's prior activities in St. Petersburg. Detail. 1. Speaking to a trusted compatriot in September 2016, two well-placed sources based in St. Petersburg, one in the political business elite, and the other involved in the local services and tourist industry, commented on Republican U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump's prior activities in the city. 2. Both knew Trump had visited St. Petersburg on several occasions in the past, and had been interested in doing business deals there involving real estate. The local business political elite figure reported that Trump had paid bribes there to further his interests, but very discreetly and only through affiliated companies, making it very hard to prove. The local services industry source reported that Trump had participated in sex parties in the city too, but that all direct witnesses to this recently had been silenced, i.e. bribed or coerced to disappear. 3. The two St. Petersburg figures cited believed an Azeri business figure, Araz Agalarov, with offices in Baku and London, had been closely involved with Trump in Russia and would know most of the details of what the Republican presidential candidate had got up to there. 14 September 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016/130. Russia. Kremlin assessment of Trump and Russian interference in U.S. presidential election. 1. Speaking separately in confidence to a trusted compatriot in early October 2016, a senior Russian leadership figure and a foreign ministry official reported on recent developments concerning the Kremlin's operation to support Republican candidate Donald Trump in the U.S. presidential election. The senior leadership figure said that a degree of buyer's remorse was setting in among Russian leaders concerning Trump. Putin and his colleagues were surprised and disappointed that leaks of Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton's hacked emails had not had greater impact on the campaign. 2. Continuing on this theme, the senior leadership figure commented that a stream of further hacked Clinton material already had been injected by the Kremlin into compliant Western media outlets like WikiLeaks, which remained at least plausibly deniable. So the stream of these would continue through October and up to the election. However, she understood that the best material the Russians had already was out, and there were no real game changers to come. 3. The Russian Foreign Ministry, MFA official, who had direct access to the Trump support operation, reported that Putin was angry at his subordinates overpromising on the Republican presidential candidate, both in terms of his chances and reliability, and being able to cover and/or contain the U.S. backlash over Kremlin interference. More heads, therefore, were likely to roll, with the MFA being the easiest target. Ironically, despite his consistent urging of caution on the issue, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov could be the next to go. 4. Asked to explain why Putin and the Kremlin had launched such an aggressive Trump support operation in the first place, the foreign ministry official said that Russia needed to upset the liberal international status quo, including on Ukraine-related sanctions, which was seriously disadvantaging the country. Trump was viewed as divisive in disrupting the whole U.S. political system, anti-establishment, and a pragmatist with whom they could do business. As the Trump support operation had gained momentum, control over it had passed from the MFA to the FSB, and then into the presidential administration where it remained a reflection of its growing significance over time. There was still a view in the Kremlin that Trump would continue as a divisive political force, even if he lost the presidency, and may run for and be elected to another public office. 12 October 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016/134. Russia-U.S. presidential election. Further details of Kremlin liaison with Trump campaign. Detail. 1. Speaking to a trusted compatriot in mid-October 2016, a close associate of Rosneft president and Putin ally, Igor Sechin, elaborated on the reported secret meeting between the latter and Carter Page of U.S. Republican presidential candidate's foreign policy team in Moscow in July 2016. The secret meeting had been confirmed to her by a senior member of Sechin's staff, in addition to by the Rosneft president himself. It took place on either 7 or 8 July, the same day or the one after. Carter Page made a public speech to the Higher Economics School in Moscow. 2. In terms of the substance of their discussion, Sechin's associate said that he offered Page and Trump's associates the brokerage of up to 19% privatized stake in Rosneft in return. Page had expressed interest and confirmed that were Trump elected U.S. president, then sanctions on Russia would be lifted. According to Sechin's close associate, the Rosneft president had continued to believe that Trump could win the U.S. presidency right up to 17 October 2016, when he assessed this was no longer possible. Sechin was keen to readapt accordingly and put feelers out to other business and political contacts in the U.S. instead. 4. Speaking separately to the same compatriot in mid-October 2016, a Kremlin insider with direct access to the leadership confirmed that a key role in the secret Trump campaign-Kremlin relationship was being played by the Republican candidate's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. Remainder of paragraph 4 redacted. Source comment. 5. Sechin's associate opined that, although Carter Page had not stated it explicitly to Sechin, He had clearly implied that, in terms of his comment on Trump's intention to lift Russian sanctions if elected president, Carter Page was speaking with the Republican candidate's authority. Company comment. 6. Paragraph redacted. 18 October 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016/135. Russia-U.S. presidential election. The important role of Trump lawyer Michael Cohen in campaign's secret liaison with the Kremlin. Detail. 1. Speaking in confidence with a long-standing compatriot friend in mid-October 2016, a Kremlin insider highlighted the importance of Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's lawyer Michael Cohen in the ongoing secret liaison relationship between the New York tycoon's campaign and the Russian leadership. Michael Cohen's role had grown following the departure of Paul Manafort as Trump's campaign manager in August 2016. Prior to that, Paul Manafort had led for the Trump side. 2. According to the Kremlin insider, Michael Cohen was now heavily engaged in covering up and damage limitation operation in the attempt to prevent full details of Trump's relationship with Russia being exposed. In pursuit of this aim, Michael Cohen had met secretly with several Russian Presidential Administration (PA) legal department officials in an EU country in August 2016. The immediate issues had been to contain further scandals involving Paul Manafort's commercial and political role in Russia-Ukraine, and to limit the damage arising from exposure of former Trump foreign policy advisor Carter Page's secret meetings with Russian leadership figures in Moscow the previous month. The overall objective had been to, quote, sweep it all under the carpet and make sure no connections could be fully established or proven, unquote. 3. Things had become even hotter since August on the Trump-Russia track. According to the Kremlin insider, this had meant that direct contact between the Trump team and Russia had been farmed out by the Kremlin to trusted agents of influence working in pro-government policy institutes like that of law and comparative jurisprudence. Michael Cohen, however, continued to lead for the Trump team. 4. Referring back to the surprise sacking of Sergei Ivanov as head of Russia's presidential administration in August of 2016, his replacement by Anton Vaino, and the appointment of former Russian Premier Sergei Kiriyenko to another senior position in the presidential administration. The Kremlin insider repeated that this had been directly connected to the Trump support operation and the need to cover up now that it was being exposed by the U.S. government and in the Western media. Company comment. The Kremlin insider was unsure of the identities of the PA officials with whom Michael Cohen met secretly in August, or the exact dates and locations of the meetings. There were significant internal security barriers being erected in the PA as the Trump issue became more controversial and damaging. However, she continued to try to obtain these. 19 October 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016/166. U.S.-Russia. Further details of secret dialogue between Trump campaign team, Kremlin, and associated hackers in Prague. Detail. 1. We reported previously, 2016/135 and 136, on secret meetings held in Prague, Czech Republic in August 2016, between then Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's representative Michael Cohen and his interlocutors from the Kremlin working under cover of Russian NGO Rosotrudnichestvo. 2. Person or persons redacted provided further details of these meetings and associated anti-Clinton Democratic Party operations. Michael Cohen had been accompanied to Prague by 3 colleagues, and the timing of the visit was either in the last week of August or the first week of September. One of their main Russian interlocutors was Oleg Solodukhin, operating under Rosotrudnichestvo cover. According to Name Redacted, the agenda comprised questions on how deniable cash payments were to be made to hackers who had worked in Europe under Kremlin direction against the Clinton campaign, and various contingencies for covering up these operations and Moscow's secret liaison with the Trump team more generally. 3. name redacted, reported that over the period March through September 2016, a company called Name Redacted and its affiliates had been using botnets and porn traffic to transmit viruses, plant bugs, steal data, and conduct, quote, altering operations, unquote, against the Democratic Party leadership. Entities linked to one Name Redacted were involved, and he and another hacking expert, both recruited under duress by the FSB, Names Redacted, were significant players in this operation. In Prague, Czech Republic, Michael Cohen agreed contingency plans for various scenarios to protect the operation, but in particular, what was to be done in the event that Hillary Clinton won the presidency. It was important in this event that all cash payments owed were made quickly and discreetly, and that cyber and other operators were stood down, able to go effectively to ground to cover their traces. We reported earlier that in the involvement of political operatives Paul Manafort and Carter Page in the secret Trump-Kremlin liaison had been exposed in the media in the run-up to Prague, and that damage limitation of these was also discussed by Michael Cohen with the Kremlin representatives. 4. In terms of practical measures to be taken, it was agreed by the two sides in Prague to stand down various Romanian hackers, presumably based in their homeland or neighboring Eastern Europe, and the other operatives should head for a bolt hole in Plovdiv, Bulgaria, where they should lay low. On payments, Sergei Ivanov's associate said that the operatives involved had been paid by both Trump's team and the Kremlin, although their orders and ultimate loyalty lay with Ivanov as head of the PA and thus ultimately responsible for the operation, and his designated successors after he was dismissed by President Putin in connection with the anti-Clinton operation in mid-August of 2016. 13 December 2016. End report. This concludes the Trump Dossier. This report was written and compiled by Christopher David Steele of Orbis Business Intelligence, London, England. This audio presentation narrated by Brian Newberry. Dossier.projectwasabi.com. If you consider this program important, feel free to repost this link, dossier.projectwasabi.com. For more audio content, some current events, some radio drama, all free, visit us online at projectwasabi.com. On behalf of Project Wasabi, this is Brian Newberry saying thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.